Welcome to Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here is the podcast host, James Delingpole.
This is a Breitbart production. Welcome to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole. And I have to say, this guest, I have been dying to get him on the show since about, I think I last saw him about 5 years ago when I was completely stoned off my face on this amazing silvery Nevada weed at this kind of, it wasn't a lost weekend, it was a lost 4 or 5 days in Vegas. And I did an interview with him at the time. None other than Ezra Levant. Ezra was so welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to see you again.
Yeah. I mean, lots has changed since I last saw you. I think were you Rebel then, or were you something else?
I was with a TV station called the Sun News Network. It was, our friends and enemies called it Fox News North because it was a conservative national TV station in Canada. And we were down in Vegas at the same conference you were. It was pretty fun. But after 3 or 4 years, the owner of that company threw in the towel because of regulatory meddling. So when the sun set, as I call it, me and a handful of other journalists who were just laid off, we tried to make a go of it online. And we started the Rebel in my living room the very day after we were all laid off. And here we are 3.5 years later, and there's about 36 of us now, and we make our money mainly through crowdfunding. It's tough going. You know what it's like on the internet. But
if you're on the right, it is. I mean,
yeah.
If you're on the left, it's fine.
If you're
free pass.
If you're on the left, first of all, you're not demonetized by social media. You're not throttled. You're not shadow banned. On the left, I mean, the Young Turks are millionaires. We actually modeled ourselves at first after the Young Turks. We thought, let's make money on YouTube. Those guys are. And we did for the first 2 years. And we were on track to make $1 million in 2017 from YouTube. We were growing 8% a month. It was amazing. And then suddenly, it was like the tap turned off. And we thought, well, what happened here? We still have the same talent. We're still producing the same number of videos, the same number of viewers. We've had 3 meetings with YouTube, and they tell us they just have decided not to let political conservative commentary be part of the ad buys that companies do. We have to be positively opted in by an advertiser, and even if we are, automatic algorithms kick in by machine to demonetize particular videos if there's keywords they don't like. For example, our atrocious prime minister's name is Justin Trudeau.
Or President Bieber,
that's right.
As I call him, yeah.
If we have the word Trudeau in a headline, odds are that video will be demonetized on spec. Feminism is another word, and ISIS or terrorist or jihad. So we can always appeal those demonetizations. It takes about 48 hours. And when you're in the breaking news or the quick news business, 48 hours to have your ads turned back on, you've basically lost 95% of your viewers anyways. So we've been effectively blockaded and embargoed by the largest video site in the world.
Is it political content they object to, or is it specifically conservative political content?
Oh, it's conservative. I mean, I remember we had a completely innocuous video. I had a meeting with their head of corporate affairs in Canada. And this was right when Eminem, the leftist rapper from
the guy
Detroit,
who used to be good until he went left.
Yeah, he's lost his mind. He's got Trump derangement syndrome. So he did a little diss track of Donald Trump. I don't know. It was pretty weak. That's an awfully hot coffee pot. Should I drop it on Donald Trump? Probably not. And it was.
Hey, wait a second. Wait a second, Ezra. You're talking about not making money. I reckon you could be the new Eminem.
Yeah, well, you know what,
You've got the flow.
Oh yeah,
you absolutely. Right. I love your flow.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, I interrupted.
So Eminem does this, and he's talking about dropping a coffee pot on Donald Trump, and obviously lots of profanity. So that video was monetized, as in ads ran. There was no shadow banning. There was no age restriction. So you have Eminem just full tilt with profanity. You could say there was a bit of a violent threat towards Trump. I wouldn't go that far. So that just full blazing, big promotion by YouTube. And I'm in there asking why a completely innocuous video by one of our talent can't get ads on it. And they said, well, and I was comparing it to this Eminem video, which was the trending video on YouTube on the day. And they have no rationale that they will say publicly. I've had 3 meetings with YouTube. All 3 explanations contradict each other. I've given up on trying to achieve anything with social media, whereas once YouTube was a source of funds for us, now it's just a way for people to discover us.
I mean, this is a big question. Is there nothing we can do to change this state of affairs? I mean, where are the Peter Thiels? Where are the people who are going to set up the video site where Conservatives aren't treated like pariahs and where they can make a living?
Well, you're a Brit, so you know Robert Conquest, and one of his rules is any organization that's not explicitly conservative over time becomes liberal.
Yeah.
And all of these tech companies were started by left-brained math guys, Sergey Brin, basically Russian Jewish mathematicians, or semi-autistic guys like Mark Zuckerberg, Asian. I mean, look at the disproportionate. It's basically white guys and Asian guys who love math. Guys like James Damore. So they built these amazing systems, and then they were colonized by less socially awkward, soft skills leftists. So don't tell me that those Russian mathematicians who built the algorithms 20 years ago were liberal. They weren't. They were colonized. So Peter Thiel, if someone like that were to start a new thing, it would be colonized too.
Yeah.
But the answer, I think, is something that traditional free marketeers are uncomfortable with, which is a kind of Teddy Roosevelt-style trust busting. I put it to you that busting up Rockefeller, busting up the oil cartel, Standard Oil, busting up those oligopolies and monopolies a century ago, Standard Oil was huge, Rockefeller was incredibly wealthy, but they say in 2018 dollars, Rockefeller was worth $250 billion. Well, what's Jeff Bezos at right now? And the thing is, Jeff Bezos doesn't just control just oil. He controls information, ideas, our perception of the world. He can make you vanish in a moment. He's got a $500 million contract with the CIA. I guess what I'm saying is the new monopoly, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, Amazon, are far more powerful politically, ideologically, our perception of the world, than John Rockefeller ever was. Yeah. And maybe we have to bust them up, because if they want to just be platforms upon which anyone can, like your telephone company. Imagine if you were having a conversation on your cell phone and you got a memo from your cell phone company saying, we heard you were talking about certain things on our phone and we didn't like that, so if you don't stop having those conversations, we're going to cancel your cell phone contract.
Yeah.
That's outrageous. You would say, you're just a phone, you're just a platform. I can say whatever the hell I want on your phone system. I mean, otherwise, you could imagine if they were a publisher, you could sue a telephone company for anything that was said on their content. But Facebook and these others have started to say, well, no, we're not just an empty platform upon which, we're not like a theater that anyone can have their own play. We actually exercise editorial control now over our platform, so we're actually a publisher. Oh, really? So you are a publisher now, and you're exercising political censorship, and you have, what percentage of the world's search traffic? What percent? You can make these political decisions, which are tantamount to partisan campaign decisions. You're completely unregulated. And here's the worst of it. The worst of it is not Facebook, YouTube, Google, Netflix, Amazon, etc., censorship. The worst of it is governments see this and say, I could censor my enemy, but then that's subject to scrutiny and debate and hearings and challenges and constitutional matters, and people can see what I'm doing because there's some transparency. But if I have a private tete-a-tete with the head of Facebook, and I say, well, listen, you got to shut down this Alternative for Deutschland for me. You got to shut down Marine Le Pen for me. We can't have another Brexit. We can't have another Trump. Can you, my Democrat friends in San Francisco's, like Silicon Valley is a nice way of saying San Francisco. Can you, my Democrat friends in San Francisco, the most left-wing city in America, can you just put your finger on the scale just a little bit? Because if I, Barack Obama, Justin Trudeau, Theresa May, Emmanuel Macron do that, Angela Merkel do that, there'll be squawking and lawsuits. But if I just whisper in your ear and say, look, we'll go easy on you for your tax avoidance. We'll go easy on you. We won't hold you culpable for hate speech if you shut down Tommy Robinson. And this is not a conspiracy theory on my part. I have watched, and you can find it quickly, a British parliamentary committee, including the notorious Naz Shah, grilling a YouTube executive who flew into London. And for half an hour straight, they're basically shouting at the YouTube exec, why have you not banned Tommy Robinson's videos? And they're saying to the YouTube exec, and let me tell you a little more about this, because I don't know if you watched that video. It's incredible. You're a Brit. You got to stand up for your people.
Yeah.
He was YouTube's head of counterterrorism. And you might be saying, what? YouTube? Head of counterterrorism? What are you afraid? Yeah, because ISIS and all the other terrorist groups use YouTube to propagate their messages. So this guy comes from the counterterrorism community. He's not a politician. He's not a techie. He's an anti-terrorism strategist, scholar. He's hired by Google to help fight against terrorism, and he comes to the UK Parliament to talk about that. And UK has 23,000 jihadis that they know of walking the streets. You'd think that, you've had terrorist attacks, Westminster Bridge, London Bridge, 7/7. It's you'd think that Brits might care about this. All Naz Shah and her Labour friends wanted to talk about is Tommy Robinson. And I don't even think this counterterrorism boss knew who he was, because they kept pounding him again, will you shut down Tommy Robinson? And I don't think he knew who he was. He kept on saying, well, I'll bring it to the attention of my people. Because I don't, and he actually held the line pretty well. But if he was under such extreme duress in public, imagine what they're saying in private. In my country, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, it was reported in the Toronto Star, our largest newspaper, that he said to Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer of Facebook, if you don't stop the, quote, fake news problem in Canada before my next election, I'll stop it myself. As in, just what I said, if you don't censor it privately, quietly, internally, with a few keystrokes that no one ever knows about, I'll take care of you through regulation, through taxation, through other penalties. I'm far more worried about that. The EU has signed an agreement with Microsoft, Twitter, Google, YouTube, and Facebook. They struck a deal. It is a contract between the EU and those four companies to censor Germany. This is not speculation. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is how it's done.
Yeah.
So who's going to stop this? There's only one man in the world who can stop this. His name is Donald Trump. He won because of the internet. That's why the great demonetization, the great censorship happened. First was Brexit. Second was Trump. The third domino was the French elections. Zuckerberg just decided to delete 30,000 Front National Marine Le Pen Facebook pages, and we're supposed to trust him that they were, quote, fake news. Well, who made those determinations? Did he get a list from Emmanuel Macron of 30,000? How do we know? If it was a government censorship, at least there would be some sort of process, some sort of record, some sort of procedure. It's much more terrifying to have Mark Zuckerberg censor than to have the government censor. And I say that as someone who has been on the receiving end of government censorship when I published the Danish cartoons of Mohammed in a Canadian magazine.
Yeah. Tell me, because I remember in the earlier days of, call it the Bannon era of Trump, there was much more talk, I think, of this trust busting. Because I think Bannon totally gets that. He gets a lot of things big time. I mean, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Trump might yet do it.
He might. I follow on Twitter a fella named Brad Parscale who ran Trump's digital campaign in 2016, and he's now chairing the Trump 2020 election campaign. I follow him because he's very bright and very thoughtful, and he really understands America. He seems Bannonite in that way. But I also follow him because he speaks clearly on these issues of Silicon Valley censorship. And I'm hopeful that his bellicosity on the subject somehow reflects the Trump administration as opposed to just a political campaigner speaking for himself.
Yeah. I think it's important. I mean, what could be more important than communication, freedom of speech?
Yeah.
Which is ultimately what this is about.
And Facebook has 2 billion users. No man in the history of the world has had that much control over our conversations. And Facebook just put out a video just 2 weeks ago on how they're dealing with, quote, fake news. And it's very troubling. One of the indicia for fake news is anything that's, quote, divisive. Well, but,
Right.
at least in Canada, when we have a vote, we call it call for a division, because a lot of things are yes, no. That's why we have votes, remain or leave.
Yeah, I know that dichotomy. Yeah.
So how is something, if two people disagree on abortion, yes, that's divisive. That's why we're having a debate about it. That's, of course, there's just no halfway on a lot of these things. But which side of that division do you think Facebook's going to come down on every time? And hate speech. What is hate speech other than speech that the left hates? Hate is a human emotion. Love and hate, contempt, respect. If you don't ever feel hate, you have a personality disorder. Hate can be a tremendous motivator to remedy the world, to reform the world. Part of being a sociable person is to transmogrify our hate into a constructive energy. But to try and outlaw an emotion itself, if we could do that, we would just pass the Love Each Other Act and, problem solved. But again, when these decisions are being made by a self-selected, hard left, insular echo chamber in Silicon Valley, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And of course, the academe is feeding this machine. Yeah. So we're creating this generation of kids who don't really value free speech at all.
No, and Daniel Pipes of the Middle East Forum came up with a list. He called it the 5P professionals, and really first clicked with me when I studied the case of Rotherham, a British city of 250,000 people, in which at least 1,400 white girls were systemically raped. Just think about the proportion of that city.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? In percentage terms, that's...
Yeah. I mean, so you've got 125,000 females. Maybe you've got 75,000 or 50,000 of them within a certain age bandwidth. 1,400 minimum were raped, and not just raped once, raped repeatedly. There was no one in that town that did not know what was going on.
So we're talking, 1 in 40 of that generation, possibly?
At least.
At least.
And so that would have been detected almost immediately by social workers, doctors, nurses, teachers, and then shortly thereafter by politicians. And anyways, so Pipes has come up with what he calls the 5P professionals. The police, the prosecutors, the press, the politicians, and the professors. Just by chance, they all start with P, but that's a good way to remember them. The 5P professionals: police, prosecutors, press, politicians, and professors. They're the establishment. They're the people that we sort of count on to protect us. All 5 of those professions were corrupted in Rotherham. And all 5 of those have been colonized, and they're part of the new censorship, the new left. The central precept of the left in 2018 is deplatforming and censoring. They no longer believe in debate because they don't have to. In the 60s and 70s, the left claimed ownership of the free speech movement because they didn't have all the levers of power. Now that they have, first of all, they've colonized the academia is completely left of center. Politics is largely left of center. The media is totally left of center. Hollywood, culture, left of center. So because they have the power, they no longer have to earn the debate. They can shut down the debate. Deplatforming. Tommy Robinson, who used to work for The Rebel, he had 400,000 followers on Twitter. By definition, those are people who positively opted in to follow him. They wanted, not only did he want to talk to them, which is a free speech right of sorts, they wanted to listen to him, which is a free speech right of sorts. It was a consensual agreement, and Twitter ought to have been a neutral platform, like the phone company in between two people having a private conversation. And yet, without merit, Twitter pushed a button and took away from 400,000 people the right to listen to Tommy. And the fact that YouTube has not yet done so meant they blasted this counterterrorism executive for half an hour in the British Parliament. You should really look that up, James. It's a disgrace to the United Kingdom, and it was on tape. This was not a hidden recording. This was the official video of your Parliament. And the fact that you're a very attentive man, you follow politics more closely than 99% of people. The fact that you don't know it, I'm not trying to embarrass you, I'm pointing out the opposite. That where was the BBC, Channel 4, IT? Where were the Guardians?
Where were they?
Well, they're one of the 5 Ps.
Yeah.
The press. They love it. They don't mind. They don't care. They agree. They despise Tommy Robinson. Not only do they disagree with him substantively, they disagree with him aesthetically and a classism. And I'm not a Marxist, but there's a palpable snobbery and anti-working class virality. There's a viciousness. And finally, Tommy got more views than they did. Tommy broke the intellectual cartel. If it were to be that no media outlet and no political party would ever talk about radical Islam and these grooming gangs like Rotherham, then anyone who was concerned about it might think, I'm alone. I'm the only one. I'm deeply concerned about Rotherham and Rochdale and Huddersfield and all these other grooming gangs. I'm deeply concerned about them, but I must be alone or I must be mad because no one else is concerned in the media or politics, the 5P professionals. And so I not only am I mad, but even if I'm not mad, if I'm the only sane one, I'm the only one, and even if there are others out there, we have no vehicle to learn to exchange information and to act on it. So what Tommy did by breaking the information cartel is he showed others that there were others concerned. His popularity proved that the cartel media, the media party, as I call it, was in on it. That it was a stitch-up, to use Tommy's phrase. And so his mere existence, even though Tommy was a homemade $2,000 camera, basically an iPhone journalist. The fact that he was speaking truth to the power, the fact that he was the one man calling out the insanity, he had to be stopped. And thus they threw him in prison, 13 months. And the most grotesque thing, I watched Tommy when he was standing outside the courthouse in Leeds, reporting about the rape gang trial. 27 men and 2 women prosecuted for the mass systemic rape of children as young as 11. Girls as young as 11 years old. And my first question was, where the hell was the rest of the media? Where the hell was the rest of them? There was one other journalist up front, Mohan Singh, a Sikh.
Yes, he's a good man.
Oh, he's like a Sikh Tommy
Very,
Robinson.
very good man.
The two of them are buddies.
You're listening to the Delingpole podcast, a Breitbart production with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ezra Levant.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson.
Everything in hip-hop is not bad. Kanye agreed with us, so let's love him today until he raps tomorrow and you turn your back. Because if you jump off when the fun of the moment is over, then you are in fact making Kanye the token he is accused of being. So please, don't do that. Don't go there.
Sonny's Corner with Sonny Johnson. Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. East on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast, a Breitbart production with me, James Delingpole, and my very special and excited and much longed for guest, Ezra Levant of Rebel Media. I've got to talk to you about the reason you're here in the UK. You've come over to cover the Tommy Robinson appeal in the High Court?
Yeah, it was, the setting was the magnificent Royal Courts of Justice building in London on the Strand, a gorgeous building. The judge who presided was no one less than the Lord Chief Justice for England and Wales. And two associate judges, very, very prestigious isn't even the right word. It was the top judges of the land.
I've rather lost my faith in the judiciary since Brexit. They've been horribly biased. It seems to me that there was a word that I was yearning to use in the previous section. Have you ever read Vox Day's Social Justice Warriors Always Lie and Social Justice Warriors Always Double Down? In the second of those two books, he describes the process that you were outlining in the first section about how every institution gets SJW converged. They get taken over. The parasite invades the host body and gradually takes it over. And I think that something similar has rather happened to our judiciary. It's been taken over by leftists. Was that the vibe you were getting in this court case or not?
I thought the Chief Justice himself, and maybe I'll be proven a fool for saying this. I mean, I paid as close attention as I could for a fellow with a short attention span like me. Every intervention the Chief Justice himself made seemed to redound to the benefit of Tommy.
Right. Every
point he asked for clarification seemed to be in support of Tommy's case. Every challenge he made was to the contrary case. So I'm hopeful. But the case is so egregious. I only have done a cursory research maybe
But you're
one
a
of
lawyer
you-
at least. You've got a better handle on it than most.
You know what? UK contempt of court law is a very interesting and obscure law, and I don't presume to be an expert in it. But just poking around on my own, I don't think a single journalist has ever been imprisoned for contempt of court in this country since 1949. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. I started going through. Yeah, that's right, Lord Burnett. That's the name
Okay,
of the Chief
so
Justice.
Lord Burnett, right? Yep.
I started going through contempt of court cases, and there's this great website that the UK courts have, just set up for contempt of court cases.
Right.
It's a specialized. It's very interesting reading.
And that's what he's been banged up for. That's why he's in solitary now. 13 months?
Sure. Yeah. Let me slow down and just give you a little background.
Please.
So, it started a year ago when Tommy was working for the Rebel. He was reporting outside a rape gang trial in Canterbury, and he made the mistake of going on the physical precincts of the court and filming a selfie video of himself for 45 seconds. He did not show any of the accused on camera. He did not show any juror. But for the mere fact that he was physically standing on the court, doing a selfie video. And I think he also made the mistake of not calling them accused rapists. I think he called them rapists.
Alleged rapists.
Yeah, he didn't say
Yeah.
alleged or
Right.
accused.
Yeah, right.
So a day or two later, police raided his home at 4:30 a.m. and hauled him up to Canterbury to answer for contempt for doing a 45-second selfie video. They could have knocked on his door. The police know where he lived. They did a 4:30 a.m. shock and awe, home invasion style raid, just to rattle him, just to upset the kids, just to upset the wife. And 4:30 a.m., I'm in Toronto, so that's 11:30 p.m. The night before. So I was still up, and I heard about this, so we got on the phone and we got the lawyers going. It was an outrageous charge, but he got a 3-month suspended sentence for it. He shouldn't have received any sentence of a custodial nature. He should have paid a £1,000 fine and told don't film in the courthouse again. There was no jeopardy or disruption to the trial whatsoever. It was punitive in every way, but we got him out of jail, and we were good enough with him. Anyways, Tommy went independent. He left the Rebel earlier this year, I don't know, February, March or something. So he went to the court in Leeds, where this 29-person rape gang trial was ongoing. And I was in Toronto, and it came up on my Facebook feed that Tommy was doing a live stream outside this court. And I thought, I was nervous because I remember the hassle we went through in Canterbury. But I watched him, and I thought, okay, he's being very careful. He's saying they're accused rapists, alleged rapists. He's not saying rapists. I thought, okay, good. He remembered that.
Yep.
And then he was not standing on the court property itself. I thought, okay, good. He remembered that. And there was one moment in the live stream where he asked a cop, am I standing okay? Am I doing okay? And the cop assented. So I thought, okay, good. Tommy's alive to
Right.
the issues. And I watched most of it. It was going on for 70 minutes. It was mainly just riffing about rape gangs in general. He wasn't speaking about what was going on within the trial because Tommy didn't know. He wasn't in the court.
Yeah.
He could in no way talk about what was going on behind closed doors because he didn't go in there. The only thing he did was he read from a BBC, your state broadcaster. They listed the names of the 29 accused. Tommy read off their website the names of the accused and little details about them. So he was reading from a UK government website, the details, but apparently there was a publication ban even on those details, but I guess the BBC doesn't have to follow the rules. The Daily Mail still, almost every publication in the UK has those details online right now, but only Tommy for reading them. 7 police swooped in. They took him before that judge. I think it was a 12-minute hearing. He was sentenced to 3 months, the suspended sentence from Canterbury, plus 10 months for what he did in Leeds. And he was whisked off to prison that night. And as we heard at the Royal Courts of Justice this week, he was not given the procedural requirements under the criminal procedure rules in the UK. For example, it was not itemized exactly what he had done wrong. So it is factually true that Tommy Robinson pled guilty.
Yeah.
But it is also true that Tommy Robinson did not know what he was pleading guilty to because the judge never itemized it. And so the judge may have thought he's pleading guilty to this. Tommy may have thought I'm pleading guilty to that. There was no meeting of the minds because Tommy didn't know what he was pleading guilty to because it was not given to him in a bill. If you look at the criminal procedure rules in the UK for contempt of court, the contemner, as he's called, must have put before him what he was done that was contemptuous, and he must be then given a chance to remediate his actions. This was not done. Tommy's legal history was not put before the court. A lawyer who knew Tommy was not assigned to him. He was given a public defender. I got nothing against that public defender. He plays an important role, but there was no reason to immediately have a drumhead trial in a summary manner. Why wasn't Tommy just told, you go home, you shut your mouth, and you come back in a week with a proper lawyer, let's have a proper hearing? Why was it so critically important that he be imprisoned immediately and for 13 months?
Yes.
And to be assigned counsel who not only does not know the client, but more importantly, does not know the obscure field of law called contempt of court, to be given a lay lawyer who likely in his entire life never had a contempt case, with a client as unique and idiosyncratic as Tommy, who never met Tommy before, and to be rushed into a trial. And by the way, I told you Tommy's live stream was 70 minutes long. So how can a hearing of 12 minutes cover the evidence? The judge didn't even watch the evidence. How can Tommy plead guilty to something he doesn't know? How can a judge sentence him for something he never saw? And he was sent to Hull prison, which Tommy says through his family is the safest prison in the UK for him, because he was not at threat of being murdered by Muslim prison gangs. But without notice, warning, explanation, or appeal, Tommy was summarily moved from HMP Hull to Onley, which in fact is dominated by Muslim prison gangs. And I'm not just talking about perhaps terrorists, I'm talking about just garden variety murderers.
Yeah.
I'm also talking about people who convert in prison to Islam for protection.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest gang in Onley. And if you want to be protected from the gang, you join the gang by converting to Islam. And if you want to serve Allah, well, you'll get your 72 martyrs. Imagine every one of them. If you stick the knife in Tommy Robinson, you're going straight to your 72 virgins. You're not just a hero in the prison, you're a hero to the whole ummah. So who was it in the UK prison system? It wasn't a judge. There was no hearing. It wasn't even the judge in Leeds. Who was it who decided to take Tommy from HMP Hull and put him in HMP, Her Majesty's Prison, Onley, where he would either be murdered or have to save himself by saying to the warden, please throw me in the hole. Please put me in solitary confinement. Please put me in a locked-up cage all day to protect my life. So either Tommy would be murdered or he would have to endure the psychological torture of solitary for 23 and a half hours a day. But you cannot do solitary for 13 months. You'll go mad. And by the way, I've spoken to Tommy's wife. I think she's visited him twice, maybe 3 times. Can you imagine that? He has fewer privileges than a murderer because of his solitary confinement, because he's being treated as a criminal prisoner. Contempt of court is not a crime because there's no mental element. It's a strict liability offense. Tommy did not mean to commit contempt of court, but he's being held as if he's a murderer, as if he's a terrorist, with those conditions and lack of privileges. A civil prisoner would have more visitation, more phone calls, more privileges. Tommy is literally being treated worse. Your average murderer in prison is free. Tommy is in solitary to protect his own life. He can't talk to his kids because the time of day they're free that he could call them, he's in the hole. Tommy has half an hour a day for exercise, shower, whatever. His wife says the only 2 things that keep him going, and I'm just telling you what she said to me. I have not spoken to Tommy because his few phone calls are obviously going to be for his lawyers and his wife and family, whatever. But Tommy's wife says the 2 things that keep him going are the fact that his supporters have crowdfunded his legal team, and I feel great about that. We could talk more about that later if you want. But the second thing, and this is my invitation to your viewers, James, is what do you do when you're in a box for 23 hours a day? How do you stop from going mad? I get fidgety after 23 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, you read. He reads all the newspapers, but you can send Tommy an email. Did you know that? You can send Tommy an email. Now, he can't send you an email back, but I know for a fact he gets them because his missus tells me. So if you want to help Tommy's spirits, send him an email, and here's how. Go to emailaprisoner.com. That's a real website. Email emailaprisoner.com. And it takes less than 2 minutes to set up an account. And Tommy's real name, legally, and you have to type this in there, is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. And just type that in, and maybe you can post this underneath the video, because I'm going to give you 2 more pieces of information. The prison is called Onley, Onley. And then the last piece of information is his prisoner number. I'm going to say that now, but you can put this under the description of your podcast. Yep. Maybe his prisoner number is A2084CG. So I'm going to say that again. Go to emailaprisoner.com. Type in his proper name, Stephen P.H. Yaxley Lennon. He's in Onley Prison, and his prisoner number is A2084CG. Send him a note. It costs 40 pence. Send him a letter. Tell him anything. Tell him a joke. Cut and paste a news article in there. Tell him you're a fan. Just send the man.
He's going to get so many letters.
Well, I hope so.
I feel so. I knew there was a problem. I mean, we all did. You've explained better than anyone I've heard or read on just how great this injustice is.
Oh, it's worse. In fact, this is what I learned in court yesterday, or 2 days ago. So he's up there in Onley. So his lawyers schlep up there, and they're given, I think, 2 hours to meet with him. It's not a lot of time, but fine. The prison decides to only bring Tommy to meet the lawyer. The lawyers are waiting. Well, first of all, first meeting, canceled by the jail. No explanation given. Oh, really? Next meeting, by the time that the prison furnishes Tommy to the lawyers, half the time has elapsed. Second meeting, by the time the prison furnishes Tommy to the lawyers, 60% of the time has elapsed. What are they playing at? What are they doing? And you know what? If he was a Muslim jihadi who was brought here from Guantanamo Bay, and he was under threat of his life, he was in solitary, he was being denied access to his lawyers and family, where's Amnesty International?
Yes, right. Where are they?
Where's all these prison rights activists? And in the case of Tommy, what was he arrested for again? Was it for murder, rape, terrorist? Reporting. So where's Reporters Without Borders? Where's Reporters Without Borders? Here we have a journalist who unwittingly, theoretically, I do not believe he engaged in contempt. I do not believe he met the test for contempt. I do not believe that
it's a fix, the whole thing.
As Tommy taught me the phrase, it's a stitch-up. But the way the prison system is, why is he still in Onley? Why is he not in Hull? And by the way, let me give you an example. I was going through this website of contempt cases, and I found a case of someone who actually was sentenced to jail time, not a journalist, George Galloway, the MP, and his former assistant, Aisha Ali Khan, very pretty lady, maybe more than just his former assistant. Anyhow, they had a falling out and they have some litigation between them. And she was engaging in inappropriate banter with him on Twitter about the lawsuit, so the court ordered her to shut up.
Right.
So there's an court order saying, hey, Aisha, don't talk about Galloway. She broke that rule. Galloway gets another court order. Shut up. She breaks that rule 23 times or 26 times. So you've got not one but 2 court orders. You have not one violation accidentally, but more than 20 violations clearly deliberately.
Yeah.
So she's charged with contempt. She's given time to retain the best lawyers in the UK. Like, she's not summarily tried. She goes before them, and she's convicted. 2 court orders, more than 20 violations, 12-week sentence. I don't know how much time she served. She probably served 6 weeks max. That's a heavy sentence.
Yeah.
But it's not 13 months in solitary.
No.
2 court orders, more than 20 violations, 12-week sentence. I'd be surprised if she served half that. Tommy, involuntary, clearly trying to make sure he was standing in the right place, did not say anything that was done. If there's a so-called publication ban, but you're reading something off the government website, is that not clear that you think you're doing what's lawful if the British Broadcasting Corporation has the names of the 29 accused, and you're reading from their page in real time, and then someone says, "Oh, that's against the law." Well, hang on. How come it's against the law for Tommy, but not for the BBC?
Because he's a political prisoner.
Well, that's the thing, and it's impossible to say that with a straight face because this is the United Kingdom, home of the Magna Carta. But let me tell you this. I was coming in to Heathrow, and I thought, I'm going to come in a day early. Because what happens if I'm detained? And I know that sounds insane, but 5 of Tommy's friends have been detained or banned coming into Heathrow. Lauren Southern, Brittany Pettibone, Martin Sellner, Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch. Well, I'm a friend of Tommy. He used to work for us at the Rebel, and I've been on TV saying, let's help Tommy. And I thought, I better come in a day early. Even though I've got trusted traveler status and Nexus and security clearance, I've got a special security for travel. I thought, I'm going to come in a day early. And then in the end, there was no problem. I had a lawyer on standby, but everything's a stitch-up. And if you think I'm engaging in speculation, ask Geert Wilders, the head of the Party for Freedom, the second most popular politician in Holland, elected parliamentarian. He wanted to come to Tommy's rally last Saturday or Sunday, whatever it was. And I've traveled with Geert before. He has a huge security team because he's like Salman Rushdie. He has high-level fatwas against them.
Yeah.
So Theresa May, it would have been a political decision made at least at the level of the Foreign Secretary or the Border Police. It would have probably been approved by Cabinet, perhaps by the Prime Minister herself. Geert Wilders, who travels to the UK quite frequently, it became known that he was coming to Tommy's rally. The British government summoned the Dutch ambassador and said, you have an elected official coming to the UK. He's welcome to come. But you should know that we will not be providing security for him as we traditionally do. And you may not have Dutch diplomatic police escort him. You may not. We will ban you from having the security detail. But feel free to come. We're not going to ban you. No. Just his security. That's essentially doing the same thing to Geert Wilders, what they did to Tommy. Oh, yeah, you can go to Onley prison. Yeah, you can be in the general population. No one's putting you in solitary confinement, Tommy. You'll be murdered, but you can be in general. Hey, Geert, you can go to this rally on the streets of London, the Islamified city, and no, we're not stopping you. You just can't have any protection. Can you imagine if they would have said that to the King of Saudi Arabia, the President of China? So they'll allow tyrants to come to London with their private security details, and they will supplement that with British security details. But Geert Wilders, subject to a Salman Rushdie-style death fatwa. Oh yeah, so do you see what? So you might be thinking, Ezra, you're a drama queen when you say you came in a day early at Heathrow because they weren't going to stop you. Stop being paranoid. Well, was Geert Wilders paranoid? And that was not an accident. The Dutch ambassador was summoned to the British diplomat to specifically put this warning to him. So don't tell me it's not a stitch-up.
Wow. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ezra Levant of Rebel Media.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think we've gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Patriot 125.
This is Delingpole, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is James Delingpole.
This is a Breitbart production. Welcome back to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and my very special guest, Ezra Levant of Rebel Media. Ezra's just accused himself of rambling on. I have to say, Ezra, what you've been saying is just gold. It's quite extraordinary. It reminds me, there are slight parallels with the Obama Department of Justice treatment of Dinesh D'Souza, the way that he committed a tiny slip which wouldn't have got any kind of serious sentence.
You're so right. You know, have you seen that new movie, The Death of Stalin?
I know about it.
May I recommend that to you and your viewers? I have to say it's the best film I've seen this year. It's a comedy, in style, but it is really the first anti-Soviet film I've seen since The Lives of Others. There's some star power of it. Steve Buscemi, is that his name?
Yeah.
The guy with the funny face. He plays Khrushchev. It's a hell of a show. You know what? It's funny and it's sad, and it's the first I'm not even going to call it right-wing, the first objective critique of Stalinism I've ever seen out of Hollywood. I'm shocked the movie was made. And I tell you that because you can see how, was it Lavrenti Beria, the head of the KGB or whatever it is? I was reminded, you see the brutality. You see the absolute brutality. And was it Beria who said, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime"?
Yeah.
Which is a way of thinking, which is, there are so many laws, and they're vague enough, and there's enough discretion, that if you put enough resources on it, you'll find a crime in anyone. There's the maxim in law, de minimis non curat lex. The law doesn't care about trivialities. That's good law. The law should not care about trivialities. If you're going 51 miles an hour in a 50-mile zone, the law should not care about that. But the punctiliousness and the pettifoggery that is being deployed by the 5P professionals, the prosecutors and the police, especially against Tommy, cannot be excused in a free society.
No.
I told you about the 4:30 a.m. raid on Tommy's house. The police know where Tommy lives. Of course they do. Why did they go to his house at 4:30 a.m.? For a contempt matter? It's a civil contempt. Why did they go there at 4:30 a.m.? SWAT team style. Why? And if you read his book, Enemy of the State, and he describes, he's a mortgage fraudster. Okay, I want to ask your listeners a question. A lot of us have mortgages. You got to put down a deposit, down payment. So you put down maybe 10%, and the bank lends you 90%, whatever it is. How many of us borrow some money from our mom, our dad, whatever? I don't know. Do you think half of people get a little bit of help from their family for their first house? I don't know. I have no idea. More than zero. But if you swear, no, that's my money, but you got the money from your mom and your dad, or you lent it to a brother-in-law, is that mortgage fraud? What do you think, James?
I would say, from my non-legal perspective, no. It's ridiculous.
Well, okay, now I've found your crime, James. And they encircled Tommy. They went after family, friends, pressure. And then they finally got Tommy. And they said, if you don't go to prison, Tommy, under this stitch-up of mortgage fraud, we're taking down this family member, this friend, so it's you or your whole family and friends. And you know that's what it was, because when Tommy was out on parole, or tag, I think they call it here, for mortgage fraud, his conditions were don't talk to people in the English Defense League. Well, hang on, what's that got to do with mortgage fraud again? And I've seen what I think is... Anyway, so I won't go on another tangent. So if you're in jail for, quote, mortgage fraud, but your parole conditions are political, maybe you weren't in jail for mortgage fraud, James. Maybe that was just the pretext.
Yes.
And you don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. You don't want to go mad, because you don't want to distrust authority and the establishment, because then there's too many things are too chaotic if we can't trust our own system. And we have to believe there's enough good people in our system. And we have to believe it's not perfect, but it's better than the rest. But I want to tell you, can I tell you one more anecdote? I don't know how much time we have left. Tommy, when he worked for the Rebel, we have little campaigns to help this guy, to help this gal. It was quite interesting. The forgotten people that have no voice. As Morrissey would say, about one girl we helped, she's nobody's nothing. There was a young woman in Sunderland who woke up one day. She went to a bar. Next thing, she wakes up the next day in a house with 5 migrant men, half naked, tries to break out, screaming in the streets. The neighbors hear, call police. They come, arrest the 5 men, do a rape kit on her, find 2 DNA samples. But the 5 men were not charged with rape. The brother comes to the house with the men. He's thrown in jail, not the men. And the prosecutors won't prosecute this rape gang, this alleged rape gang. Her name's Chelsea. Tommy meets the family. Anyhow, so we go to help Chelsea. And we decide we're going to hire a lawyer for Chelsea and do a private prosecution of these men if necessary. But I want to check it out because that's unusual to do a private prosecution. Do you know what that is? If 5 men are accused of raping Chelsea, and the Crown Prosecution Service will not prosecute them, and in fact, if they're put in safe houses, and in fact, if Chelsea's brother comes, but he's the one thrown in jail, and if witnesses don't have their witness statements taken by police, well, what do? The system's gone mad. The 5P professionals. The local newspaper in Sunderland calls the woman a liar, but the police took the rape kit, and the neighbor, we interviewed a neighbor who had her evidence and said no one came for it. So what do? Well, there's something called a private prosecution where you can hire your own QC and go to a judge and say, Judge, the Crown prosecution for some reason will not prosecute, but I am here to prosecute. So that's a heavy thing to do, James. That's a lot of money. And I got to make sure that this gal is who she says she is. I want to check it out. I want to let her know how tough this is going to be. I want to make sure her family supports this. So I fly from Toronto, Canada. I fly Toronto, Dublin, Newcastle, hop in a cab, drive to Sunderland. That's a long journey. And I meet Chelsea and her mom and her dad, and Tommy's there, and we hired a lawyer. We had to go through 8 lawyers before we found one who would take the case. 8 lawyers. The last law firm, the 7th, said, we won't take Chelsea's case for reputational reasons. What are you talking about? She's a mom. She's apolitical. They didn't want to take the case of a white girl being raped by alleged Muslim rape gang because of reputational reasons. That's what they said. I have the email. I can show it to you.
Marvelous.
So I go to Chelsea's house. It's a small house. We couldn't even all fit in there. There's me, there's the lawyer, there's 2 cameramen, there's Tommy, there's Chelsea, the mom, and we couldn't even all fit in the house. So we go into the backyard, and even that's not that big, so we sort of spill out into the alley. It's very small. And I'm only there for a few hours. I got to go back to Canada. But the meeting went well. Chelsea met the lawyer, everything was good. I'm talking to some guys. Family friend comes over, he tells how he had a Union Jack flag, the police came to tell him to take it down. I've heard that story so many times. I always thought people were just pulling my leg. That happens in the UK. So we're standing there. I'm wearing a suit jacket. I mean, I'm not dressed fancy, but I'm wearing a suit jacket. So maybe I'm standing out a little bit in this town. And Tommy's there. Maybe he was recognizable. He's a very recognizable guy. So someone must have called as an informant to some authorities that there's someone in from out of town wearing a suit jacket. And maybe is that Tommy Robinson there? So understand, we're in the backyard. It's a tiny yard. And I'm actually standing in the alley. And this truck comes up the alley. It's the only car that goes by all morning. And I thought it was a fire truck because it's a big truck. It's not a fire truck. I think it might even said fire on it because I thought it was a fire truck. And it slows right on down when it's next to us. And it's got 4 closed-circuit TV cameras on it. And it scans all of us. It scans us. And I say to the fellas, what's that? And they say, I'm not going to try and do the accent. I love that Sunderland accent. It's gorgeous. They say, watch, that's not a fire truck. Watch, it's going to drive right up to the police station there and go right back in. They want to know who's here. I have to tell you that if someone would have told me that story, I'd say, shut up. I'd say, you're lying, you're exaggerating, you're trying to make it, you're telling a tall tale. I would not have believed that. I saw that with my eyes, and I could not believe it. I took my cab. I told you I took a cab from Newcastle to Sunderland. And the guy hears my accent, and he said, where are you from, and what are you here for? And I didn't want to tell him too much because I wanted to hear from him. I said, have you heard of this Chelsea? He said, oh, yeah, we've had the demos. And we're talking, so it's a bit of a drive. And I say, well, we're going to see if we can help. And he says, if you're looking for justice, you've come to the wrong town. And he told me his story. I won't get into that. Every time I probably visited the UK but once a month when Tommy was with us. And it was always a whirlwind, and Tommy's one-man hurricane Tommy. And it wasn't until I'd get on that 7-hour flight home that I could reflect on what I had just seen. Like, we would jam in a lot of things. And every time I would think, what did I just see? And I couldn't believe it. And I grew up in Canada part of the Commonwealth. And we love the UK. Magna Carta, Winston Churchill, Battle of Britain, John Milton, free speech, Parliament, mother of all parliaments, rule of law. I say to my friends, don't go to the places I've been. Go to the happy places and check off all the bucket list things you want to do now, because that country's changing.
That's interesting, because I think from where I am, I look at Canada as a beacon of liberal intolerance, of a basket case country. I mean, particularly with President Bieber now, but I'm thinking before that of the Mark Stein being sued, I think, by some Muslim rights group for the article he wrote in Maclean's, was it?
Yeah.
And a Canadian climate scientist called Tim Ball having his life ruined by the system in Canada. But you're telling me that my country is probably even more illiberal and politically corrupt in terms of injustices like this than your country.
Absolutely. And I say that as someone who myself was prosecuted in Canada under the same Human Rights Commission regime. I published the Danish cartoons of Mohammed in a magazine I had a dozen years ago. I was put through a 900-day process, but they weren't police. They were human rights busybodies. I was under no jeopardy of imprisonment.
Right.
There was at least a process and a procedure. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying when the Metropolitan Police of London have 900 officers on the mean tweets beat, that is not an exaggeration. 900. You got more gun crime than New York now. You got stabbings every few hours. You got acid attacks. What is that? But you're taking 900 cops off those less important beats to put them on the Facebook. Just last night, BBC did, who are these Tommy Robinson supporters? And they show a protest. I think it was at Trafalgar Square. And someone had a little balloon of Peppa Pig. You know that little cartoon pig?
Yes, yes.
And they had taped a picture of Sadiq Khan to Peppa Pig. And that's it. I just told you the whole story. So I suppose it was a tiny reply to the Trump balloon. I'm not even going to call it a blimp because it was so tiny. You can't call that a blimp.
No, it was embarrassing.
So the Trump balloon, which was meant to be an ugly caricature of Trump, that was not just fine, but it was given the imprimatur by Sadiq Khan's own city government. That's fine. That's fine politically. That's fine by the media. Loved it. It's fine by police, obviously. But there was a Peppa Pig balloon that someone put a picture of Sadiq Khan. That's it. They didn't do anything else. Police, and you got to see this BBC report from 2 nights ago. Police, and BBC was very approving. Police said that crossed the line. And you can see the police move in on the person with the Peppa Pig balloon, including mounted police, like it's a riot. And
your tax pound at work.
but it's not even the money.
Yeah.
It's you're charging them with a horse because he's got a Peppa Pig balloon with a picture of Sadiq Khan. And the BBC did not go into police brutality. They were reporting this with at least neutrality, perhaps some approval. Later, the same BBC host was trying to lecture a woman that there's no such thing as Muslim rape gangs. You're simply wrong, gaslighting her. And that is the 5P professionals. So what do we see there? We saw police. Probably some prosecution. You had a Peppa Pig balloon. You had the press in collusion. Britain is pretty far gone. And that's why they're trying to stop Brexit, because Brexit was the last best chance of pulling out of the globalist thrall, stopping the open borders. That's why they're trying to stop it. See, the thing is, when Trump won, at least there was a person at the top, Trump, who could fight.
Yeah.
But there's no person who won Brexit. I suppose the closest would be Nigel Farage, but he then sort of semi-retired. So who is there to defend Brexit? There's no one person who says, you're taking power away from me and giving it to Hillary Clinton. Like, if there was no Trump at the head of Trumpism, they would have tried to Remain. The same way Remain is slow-walking this. but Trump himself was such a force. Who was the man in personifying Brexit? They're trying to stop your Brexit. It's morally and strategically and tactically identical to the delegitimization campaign that Trump has been enduring for 550 days.
Yes. We saw it in the early days of his administration. Even within the administration, there were people who were trying to defang Trump, who were trying to delegitimize Trump.
To this day,
Yeah.
look at James Clapper and all the other deep staters. It's real.
Well, clearly we have a deep state over here in the UK, and presumably this, going back to Tommy Robinson, we're talking really quite high level. I mean, I think, did he not suggest once that it was perhaps Theresa May herself who was responsible for his persecution?
Well, who would have had the authority to say to Geert Wilders, come at your own peril? That's not a low-level decision. That's not a beat cop or some low-level diplomatic desk making that decision. That's a minister. That's a ministerial-level decision, cabinet-level decision. Let me just tell you what to look forward to, because I've been rambling on, but let me tell you, for those who care about Tommy.
Yeah.
And I care about Tommy. I mean, Tommy's a character. It's not easy being Tommy's, quote, boss. I was his boss for about a year. Tommy doesn't have a boss. You know, I asked him once, I said, have you ever had a boss before, Tommy? He said, no. I said, I can sort of tell. You're not good at it. And he's a handful. I called him Hurricane Tommy. I mean, you can't put lightning in a bottle. It was tough. I mean, I love the guy, but you know, he's a force of nature. You can't control it. And he worked with us, and I mean, he got in trouble in Canterbury, and we got him out. And he went independent, and it was glorious to watch. It scared the hell out of me when he was arrested in Leeds. And I called up his team who used to work with us, because I saw the last words Tommy said before he went into that police truck were, "Get me a solicitor," right? And I thought, geez, well, that's the thing. Tommy, we had infrastructure around Tommy when he worked at the Rebel. We had lawyers, we had staff, we had whatever, and Tommy didn't like those strictures, right? It was like handcuffs on him. You can't put. It's like a lion. You don't put a lion in a zoo. He wanted to be free. All right. When things really hit the fan, so he hadn't worked for us for a few months. I mean, I like the guy was an amicable enough parting the ways, but I saw this and I thought, this is heavy now. A 13-month sentence. That's heavy. That is political prisoner stuff. So I talked to the family, talked to the missus. They got a message back and forth from Tommy in prison, and they finally decided to appeal. I won't get into the private matters, but I'm very glad to say that in the end they decided to appeal. And even though Tommy is not with the Rebel anymore, we have a list of 152,000 Tommy supporters, you know, and I thought, I know they want to help, but there's no bloody way I'm going to meddle with Tommy, who's no longer with the Rebel, unless I have the approval of him and his lawyers and his family. I'm just not going to, I don't need that. But after a few weeks, when the reality set in, I said, look, we'll just help you out. Our people are ready to help. We've done this before in Canterbury. Let's get you a dream team of lawyers. No disrespect to the first crew. Let's lawyer up properly. Let's pay the bills. And let's get her done. And I'm pleased to say Rebel viewers crowdfunded the legal bills. And any surplus is going to the family. I feel really good about that too. I'm not going to get into more details there, but I feel like we're providing some infrastructure to him that he didn't have when he was on.
Has he got the best QC money can buy?
I did not select the QC.
Right.
I saw the QC in action in court, and I would say he's well regarded, and he did a good job.
What next?
The judges, the three judges, paid very close attention, and they said that they want to confer and issue a proper ruling, and that's appropriate because what they rule, given that it's the Lord Chief Justice and two associates, and that this is such a prominent case that touches on so many things, the ruling they issue will be a binding precedent for years, for decades to come.
Oh my God, this is scary.
We are about to see a ruling that will touch on how the press can report on trials, how contempt of court procedure is done in the future, proportionality of sentencing.
Yeah.
It's going to touch on a lot of things, and it will be precedent that binds many other cases. So it's appropriate for the judges not just to riff, but rather to plan this and craft a judgment that not only can meet the tests of this case, but that can be clear enough to provide guidance for other cases. So it is appropriate that they take some time. I'm frustrated by the fact that they say they may want to take the rest of July. That's 2 more weeks of Tommy rotting in solitary. But I believe Tommy will be freed because he's already served 2 months of very hard time. That's disproportionate to begin with. The lawyers have also appealed the convictions themselves on substantive grounds. We won't take time on that now. I believe Tommy will be free, and I believe he will come out to a larger base of supporters than he went in, because so many of his ominous predictions have been proved true. So many of his warnings about the state, about the corruption of the 5P professionals, about the bias in the judiciary and the prosecution and the police and the professors and the press and it's all been proven true. And here's why they want to go after Tommy, because Tommy's the toughest guy you're ever going to meet in terms of courage.
Yeah.
And stubborn. And I say that I love the guy.
Yeah.
But he's a handful. Which is what you need. You know the old saying, reasonable people conform to the world. Unreasonable people make the world conform to them. Therefore, all progress depends on unreasonable person. Tommy
is an unreasonable.
He's unreasonable.
Yeah.
And thank God, because how else are you going to stand up to the entire establishment? That's why I love him. He drives me crazy. But how can you not love a man who cares so much for his country that he cannot stop? And he put himself in jeopardy outside Leeds. And it bothered me that he did so from a legal and corporate point of view. But how can you not love the motivation?
Totally.
Let me, I know I'm out of time, but let me throw this. So he's going to come out, and he has more friends than when he went in. He has a few political friends dipping their toe in the water. The leader of the UKIP, Gerard Batten, Lord Pearson of UKIP. I guess the list stops there. Some American friends. There was a congressman that came over, some friends from the continent. I hope he stays safe when he's out, because a lot of people want to hurt him. People either who want to take violence into their hands. I hope he stays safe physically. I'm worried about that. And you know that if he beats this rap on appeal, that the deep state, the prosecutor, the police, that they will be looking for him on any technicality in the future. And I do not want Tommy to come back to the Rebel. I can't handle the HR. He's too much for me. I love the guy. But I'm not saying come back to the Rebel. I'm hoping that he can build around him a bodyguard, not just physically, but a legal bodyguard, because Tommy must know, and surely he knows, that they will not stop until his voice is silenced, either through, I'm sorry to be macabre, either through death. I'm sorry to say that, but it happened to Pim Fortuyn. It happened to Theo van Gogh. It happens to critics of Islam. They get dead. And he is the most wanted man in the UK from an Islamification point of view. And he truly is an enemy of the state. And it's been an honor to come back and help my old friend through crowdfunding. That's all I've done. We've done the crowdfunding. I don't want to say I've done a stitch more than that. But when he's free, I hope he understands the responsibility he carries on his shoulders. It's not just to be Tommy. It's all the people who love him and support him and help him. And I'm not condescending here. I'm just saying I hope he realizes. I haven't talked to him. I haven't talked to him on the phone. I sent him emails. Because so many hopes are riding on him, I'm not going to try and govern him. When he worked for the Rebel, I tried to govern him. I don't want to do that. I hope he can govern himself enough to stay safe and to stay out of jail. Because this was a stitch-up. But if he allows the deep state to get him on anything, if he is sloppy or careless, they will get him. And he owes it to his supporters and to himself and to the people he cares about to be 10% safer. A 90% Tommy Robinson is still better than anybody else. He doesn't have to always go 110%. He can dial it back 10% and still be the most effective man in the UK. This is my advice to him. If he was sitting in front of me, I would say this to his face. I'm not criticizing him. I'm saying So much depends on you. Dial it back. Think of your 3 babies. Think of them. If you don't want to think about anything, think of your 3 babies who want their dad, who need their dad, and who haven't seen their dad. They've seen their dad once in the last 2 months. Tommy Robinson will be free in a matter of weeks. After that, the tough part comes, James. He is more important to the UK than Geert Wilders is to Holland, because there's no one else in the UK.
Thank you, Ezra. You're listening to the Delingpole podcast with me, James Delingpole, and I think we can all agree, pretty fabulous guest, Ezra Levant of Rebel Media. Thank you for speaking on behalf of Tommy. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here.
Thanks a lot.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot Channel 125.